I am going to call this meeting of the Board of Education to order. This is the Board of Education training from 5:30 to 7. I am calling it to order. Let's please stand and have a moment of silence in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the
United States of America, and to the republic for which I stand, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The roll call for this meeting, all board members are in attendance, and Mr. Hiley will be here momentarily.
Okay.
And so we'll move on, and we will start the board training, which is board protocols and procedures.
I do thank you for the opportunity to be here this evening. And basically, we will go through the first document you did, and then we will go through the document that I handed out. It is about board protocol and procedure. If you will, for the first document called considerations, you go to pages 4 and 5. We're going to move around these pages tonight. Now, this is the rank ordering. So if you've not done that, take about 5 minutes to just do this until we can discuss that. So there's 10 questions here, and these 10 questions you rank them, importance from 1 to 10, based on what you think the most important role of the corporate county board is, and then we'll discuss that, and then we'll move into that larger document I just handed out. So take about 5 minutes if you do.
I put X's by the ones I thought
That'll be fine.
were
Yeah, we'll
the
go
most
through that,
important.
how we, the most
Because I
important, and
think
then
they're all important, but
Yeah.
I put X's by the ones I thought
that
were the
is
most
sort of the
important.
secret there. Okay.
Howard, do you have another copy of that?
Yes, sir, let me hand it out to you.
I do, I have
Here's
one.
one.
Oh, thank you.
Did you have a copy of that? Okay, thank you.
I missed one.
Or maybe 9. I hope.
No, there's 10. There's one on the other
We had one
page, and I
document that said
didn't.
10 and there were 9s. 2 more minutes and we'll get started.
I gotta get it all put together and out here.
Okay, there are 10 items here. So protocol and procedure, I think most of the open meetings laws, things have been done by Mr. Boothby, is that correct? He's done open meetings training. So we're gonna concentrate on the role of the board this evening, the corporate role of the board, and then also board development, how you are thrown together as 5 board members after the primary election every 2 years to choose a president. You may not know everyone. You have to then form as a group, and I think that's how we'll get to the second thing after we do this, and then we'll go back to some of these earlier questions on this. So if we had to rank these, and there is no right and wrong because this is your own opinion or your own approach to your position as a county board member. So some people have ranked the first one is number 1. Other people have gone through that we've done. So maybe let's just go through how many put the first response. The county board's primary role is that of monitoring school district fiscal matters as the most important thing of the board. All right. There's
I had it in top 4.
top 4, and you did top 4, so we'll get this. We can move it around. Okay. How many had the second? The county board's primary role is to optimize student learning and achievement. How many had that as the first role? Okay. How many had the county board's primary role is to ensure various aspects of the system, prepare kids for the future? How many? Okay, let's just do it this way. How many had? What was your on this? The question number 2, the county board's primary role. What were the responses we had for that?
For the second one,
Yeah.
you mean?
Mhm.
I put number 3.
3, okay.
I put 4.
Okay, 4. You put 3? Okay. Anyone else? 5. And you had did you have that in your top 4? Okay, all right. Now, let's go to the next. County board's primary role is to prepare kids for the future. How many had that? What were your answers on that?
The third one?
Yeah, the third one, yeah. County board's primary role.
I had 1.
1, okay. Anyone else?
I had 2. I probably had mine a little too low, but I have number 6.
You had 6, okay. Anyone else?
I had a 6.
6, okay. Anyone else?
6.
6, okay. All right. Then the county board's primary, did you have that? You did not have that as one. Okay, let's go to the next one. Primary role is to secure a competent county superintendent. What were the responses to that?
I have 2.
2, okay.
I had 1.
1, okay.
4.
4, okay.
1.
1, okay.
1.
1, okay. Now, all right. Then county board's primary role is to ensure its constituencies are prepared for the future. That means the school system goes and the school system works to create a vision for the future that the county people within the county can learn about and buy into. What was the responses on that? It's almost like the other one, but it's a little
I
bit.
put 7.
7, okay.
Yeah. 5.
5, okay.
5.
5, okay.
7.
7, okay. 3, okay. Now, county board's primary role is to ensure that its employees reach full potential. That means in their role as educators, but also in place of the parents, serving, and stewards of the students under their control.
I put 8.
8, okay. All right.
4.
4, okay.
8.
Okay.
8.
Okay. And you didn't have that one. All right. County board's primary role is to advance policies, programs, and services deemed in the best interest of the school system.
4.
4.
Okay.
7. 9.
Didn't have that. Okay. All right. County board's primary rule is to abide by all laws, rules, and regulations.
That would be a 5.
5, okay.
County board, all, by
Yeah.
all us, 1.
What?
1.
1, okay.
I had 1.
1, okay.
3.
3, okay. 2, and you had that as 2, okay. County board's primary role is to act in its corporate capacity to ensure the school district is accountable.
9.
9, okay.
7.
7, okay?
9.
Okay.
2.
2, okay? Didn't have that. Let me go to the last. Okay, the county board's primary role is to serve as a local legislative body, acting within the bounds of law and state board. It's almost the same as the other. It is, that's right. Okay. Anyone have that one?
It got low man on the totem pole for me. It's a
Alright.
10.
Okay. All right, now, you see the differences here? So when we get into this forming the corporate board, we're going to talk about people come to the table with different ideas about what their role is. And then they bring that notion to the table, and then you have to work as a team, given whatever factors you have to deal with or brought before you, then to make decisions. Sometimes you have to make those decisions quickly, sometimes they form over time. So now, let's talk about, let's go to this next document here, and then we'll come back to the list. Now, when I was in graduate school, we had we really took this and we learned a lot about it. It's how organizations form. First of all, I think most board members do not sit around on the first day you're in office to see how and think about how an organization forms. But to me, this really helps us learn a lot about roles and responsibilities and how you work together as a corporate body, bringing not only you had your differences on, not really differences, but your priorities on the first part, but also getting into the nature of working as a board, as a team. Now, this research is called forming, storming, norming, and performing. It's really kind of old, but it makes a lot of sense because organizations, as I mentioned a moment ago, you come together as a group. You may not know each other except when you've got to the board level. Then you have to form and work as a group, a corporate body together. So this is a way of looking at how that occurs. So this is based on pretty good research, but it's again based on team research. So this idea was that looking at bodies, you go through a forming stage where you learn about your role, then you go through kind of figuring out what your individual preferences, how they play out, your approaches play out, then you go to getting kind of an equal, then you go to performing. But then Tuckman said that interpersonal relationships and tasks are really part of this as well. So how you work together as a team and how you work together to form as a group and a body are often based on factors other than just these strict things like, forming, storming, norming. It's really learning how to work together as a group and as a body. That's the most important thing. The interpersonal part of this is most important, and we'll get to some of these things in a moment. So the first part is you go on page 1 here. The team meets and learns about opportunities and challenges, and then agrees on goals and begins to tackle the task. Then team members tend to behave quite independently at first. Well, that's only natural because you really are just beginning to settle in your role. Now you're a settled board. I'm talking about how, if we were to look back on this, how you might say that you got to where you are now going through these processes. So in my own estimation, the first thing a county board does when you have your organization meeting in July is you look at what's ahead for the year. That's one thing you're given. You elect officers. You have the path that you're going to proceed. So one of the things here is, how does the individual board member fit in into a corporate board? Because you can have people on boards who never fit in. They're rogue members sometimes, or by their disposition or personality, they just don't really fit right into the mold immediately, but they're brought into the mold maybe a little bit more because of issues they have or issue-specific things that they have that they're facing. If you're in like some of the counties and you have to close schools, you don't have much time to figure that out. That's going to be mandated. That will be mandated by the legislature. So you have to more or less get into that groove or into that way of thinking. But most boards do have a little bit of time to begin to learn how to work together and what each member's preferences are, their leadership styles, their thinking styles, and things like that that emerge in this process. So the first thing is, of course, sometimes this doesn't happen overnight. Some people want to test boundaries. Some people want to show their expertise on something. That came up at the winter conference we had in Morgantown. Why don't we really have training based on giving board members expertise? Somebody's a banker, then why don't we train people who are bankers to do the financial part? Well, you all have to you all have to be part of the financial part. I have a little bit of trouble with that because the role of the board is to have an approach to the issues you have by sharing knowledge, but by not hoarding knowledge. So if you did that in training, I'm afraid we might train people in special ed who've been in that field. So whenever a special ed problem comes up, that person either assumes or they're considered to be the guru on special ed, but then everybody has to make the decision. You all live with the decision. I didn't come away pledging to do that with training because I don't think that's right. I think what we need to do is we need to get everyone at a level of understanding and language enough that we know all the problems so that we can all contribute to the decision making. So, but during this period of time, people get to know you. Some people are very outgoing when they get on the board. Some people are reticent. Some people already have formed opinions about what needs to be done and doesn't need to be done. You bring every bit of that to the table. Whether you show it or not, you bring all that to the table, and then it's really for the development of the group that does work here. Now, storming part on page 2, and we're not going to go through all this, but then we get into the board begins to sort things out. Okay. Now, sometimes this is brought to you by issues you have. Sometimes you learn about individual working styles. But look what in the middle, the hierarchy of position. Some people on the board, through expertise, personality, outlook or whatever, there begins to be a hierarchy that it begins to emerge. Those people may be president, they may not be president, but then you begin to see who people are going to refer to maybe through the contributions they make as the people who are going to lead on certain issues or lead on a lot of issues. So that's part of the sorting out here. But the issue again is how do you work together as a board? And so I ask a question. How does holding members accountable to working toward the group really, how does that work out? I mean, do we want freelance board members? Do we want everybody to be together? Do we want people to think as a team? But you can't really say think as a team. You have to work into that. Is that right? You've been on the board for a while.
Yes.
Okay. So it's getting everyone to some kind of accountability to hold the board and members of the board so that there is a working definition of the role that you have. Be informed on issues may be one. If you don't know about special ed, then learn, get to be, so that there are certain people on the board who may lead you in that way, but then you have a responsibility also to be knowledgeable about those issues as well. But then how do you hold board members accountable if they don't do that? I mean, what if some board member comes to the meeting and says, that's not my area of expertise, I'll listen to whatever's presented to me, I'll make my decision then, whereas other people, so we're really getting at how you work together as a group. Do you ever find that some people on issues are more prepared than others because of their expertise? Because they've read the agenda more, they've done research? So what is there any kind of role to make all boats rise, be sure everyone has on the same page? Or will you ever be that way as a board?
I think we, something, and I'm just gonna bring it. I don't recall this board ever evaluating ourselves for a while and to really discuss each other's.
Yeah.
To bring us up to the best of our ability.
Yeah.
And I'm talking every member here.
Now, you do have that as self-evaluation, but I don't really think it gets at that. It doesn't get at working as a team. It gets at other things, but I don't think it gets at that. So one of the things I think that a board sometimes need to do, and it's really hard to do with open meetings laws like we have, just simply figure out, what do we need to know about on this issue? This issue's coming up. What do we need to know? All the stuff that came out of the legislature, a lot of that has to do with the calendar. It's a new way of looking at a calendar. If you go along with that, it's a new way of looking at special ed in some regard. So how do you prepare the board members so that everyone has some kind of common understanding or knowledge about issues, fiscal issues, things of that nature? Or is it that your role except to prepare yourself? That's really what I'm asking. Is there any kind of a, is there kind of a culture of this board that, hey, we want everyone to be on the same page here? Or not maybe the same page on the decision, but on the same page of knowing the issues? Which would you rather describe it as? Knowing the issues or being on the same page?
Knowing the issues.
Knowing the issues, because if you know the issues, then you have the role of an individual member to vote your conscience. And there's studies have made how school board members make decisions. They make decisions on their own knowledge, values, background, and orientation to issues. And the second part of that decision making is how other board members, their peers, will make a decision. And the third is what the superintendent recommends. It's not linear. And it depends on issues, actually. Fiscal issues, you're probably going to have a different grouping of board members. Issues relating to teaching and teaching profession issues, a different grouping of members. But the role is, I think, and I'm giving you my own bias, you can't hold anyone accountable for how they decide the issue. And I don't know that you can hold anyone accountable and make them prepared to have the same foundation of knowledge unless you want to do that and make that really part of your philosophy as a board. Because you can come to these meetings and never read your agenda. You can come to these meetings and really do no advance, your understated intervention, but I mean individually. You can come to these meetings and see the agenda for the first time, don't do advance work, still do the same contribution by your vote. You can come to these meetings and do a lot of research on issues, but you still have that individual vote to make. Now, you're under interventions we're talking about before that and after. So part of that is it's really creating a culture, I think, where the county board wants to, at least as part of its philosophy and protocol as a board, to be sure that everyone is prepared. And then, of course, you do your own voting based on that. So then I'll go down and ask another question. Sometimes this is made as a linear thing. You form and then you storm, but it doesn't really work that way because sometimes an emergency issue will come up or something like that. So you really have to be able to operate under pressure. That may move some of these steps along. Now we get into the forming. Now, norming. Sometimes you have a 2-year refresh of the county board by elections sometimes. So what have you already done? The norming, the forming, the storming, and now you get 2 new people or 3 on the board. What happens there? What do you do? I mean, do you educate them? Do you bring them along?
I think so.
Yeah, I mean, it's a refreshing.
It is.
It is. And
it helps everybody.
Yeah, it affects everyone. So maybe you've gone through this whole process here, and then 2 or 3 new people come on the board, and they come on the board with ideas that are fresh from the environment. Whatever's fresh from the environment, and that's the value of that. Sometimes superintendents and others don't really understand that, but the value is the refreshing means you come to the board with whatever's out on the marketplace of ideas affecting Tyler County. And you bring that to the board, but if you're a settled member of the board, you may see that in a totally different light because you've got more information. And then you have to get people to have the information that you have maybe presented to them, but they may have a different shade of understanding of that information because they're fresh from the campaign trail. So the refreshing does well because it brings those ideas in that otherwise wouldn't get to the organization, the school board or the district. But then you have to really figure out how to integrate that in with your balance, the knowledge you may know as a seasoned board member, how to bring all that information in. Or do you bring it in? I mean, what happens here? You've been brought on board by elections. What happens when you get elected to a board? If you're freshly elected, are your ideas just taken immediately that you've heard from campaign trail? How do they get processed as a board?
I think, quite frankly, my first time on the board, it's like a rude awakening. I mean, to find out the way boards really work when you're not a part of one and you come on a board.
Right.
It's a completely different animal than what you think it's going to be before you get on it.
Right.
And all your preconceived notions of what you're gonna be able to do and what it
Yeah.
accounts for is completely different.
And for me, first time we're going to board is, you got others may set for a few years.
Right.
And done a great job, but then people seem to think they'll get a little relaxed, and so the new ones come on board. Guess where they're going? They're coming to the new one, and just to try to get that extra
Yeah.
foot.
In other words,
and try to get to the new ones versus the ones that they've tried and repeat and not being successful.
So if you're out on the campaign trail, following up on that, you're on the campaign trail, you're going to be brought issues that they've probably already processed,
Absolutely.
that are members of the board. But then you're going to be told a version of that you're going to find is different than when you sit around the board table for the first time. So then your orientation is, do I do what the people who vote, now your true constituents are students, let's say the voters. Let's say you have the voter hang on things and you know it quite well and you're elected. So you get on the board and you want to bring that to the table. Let's say you're not a minority, you're a minority of the board, 2 members, or then you want to bring that to the table. Are you really facing resistance, or are you facing institutional knowledge you don't have? That's really the question. And if you're facing institutional knowledge you don't have, then you've got a learning curve before you can ever get to what you were voted in to do. Is that not right? And when that learning curve becomes different than what people have told you when they voted for you, what do you do? If you promise this or that, and never promise that as a school board member, because there's about 14 or 15 different agencies that say you can't do this or that, including the orientation you go to that basically says, hey, look, you can't really do anything, look at the guy out the window there. But we're gonna get away from that, because there's a lot of things you can do that we need to work on. But this is part of the group formation, because the group formation also is, hey, look, there are people who are counting on me. Is this not true? Tell me if it's not. There are people who are counting on me to do X and such. And now I'm finding it's not as hard, it's kind of hard to do. I can't get it through. So then what do we do after that? How does that affect group formation?
I think it goes back to your community relations, some of the questions. I mean, again, it's one thing to talk to the community, but at the same time, don't. At least I try not to ever, have I? Yes, I have. And it's bit me. But I would suggest not to get tied up with the community and promising things. It's don't do that. And speak to them, talk to them, right? But don't give them any indication how you're voting or.
This is kind of a little bit off that, but really the public has an idea of what you do is so different than what you really do. And what you really have, I don't say permission or authority, but what you really can do. You can do a lot more, and you can do a lot more under what we're called modified policy governance. That means your superintendent primarily, your CEO, and the chief instructional leader. For instance, I'll give you a code. 1825 says, and it's under the state board section where the state board actually is told how to do its rules. It has a whole provision there that says if you have an alternative way of trying to maximize student achievement, you can take it to the state board. If they approve it, you can do it. Now, how many superintendents and boards would have time or would really feel comfortable doing that and being out on that limb? I mean, think about it. You would be one of 55. But you could probably take part of that to the state board. In fact, I've seen this done. You could say, well, on this aspect, this was done under, we were under Common Core, whatever that was called, which was just renamed. But we were under Common Core. The Putnam County Board came before the state board and said, you've got the math all wrong. This math teaching, it's all completely wrong. So the state board gave them a variance, and they used 1825 to get their variance. But that takes what's called excavating. That takes digging down into details, going to the state board and getting a variance from it. but you can actually maximize student achievement that way. If you feel like, as a board, and you're led by your superintendent, the CEO, you can really do those things like that, but you've got to have a united county board behind you, and teachers may not like that, constituents may not like that. But part of this is just getting, really we're talking about forming as a group and learning how to operate together. And so integrating members in is probably one of the hardest things that sometimes does. It's hard on everyone. It's hard on the system. It's hard on the members who are veterans. It's hard on the newer members who feel like, hey, look, this is my priority, but now I'm being told it has to take a back burner. So you have to kind of read. So one of the first things you do as a board, I think, is say, if I were board president, what are your roles? What are your particular goals you want to accomplish during the next 2 to 4 years? You know, your time you're on the board. Ask people so you really know. And you might be surprised that they may be informed by voters, but they may have their own opinions also. You know, so maybe the common way to get started here would be when each member, you can do this as a work session or whatever, say, you know, as we look at the next 2 to 4 years, what are your individual goals that you think should become corporate goals as a board? And that way you will know what people, that way it can be brought out in the open. Maybe your role is, we want to increase CTE effectiveness. We want to do this or we want to do that. How we know if you don't ask? So maybe that's a way to get ideas out and to work and to frame those in. Now, another thing here is, can the county superintendent really count on these 5 people having a common vision? Now, can you count on that? Can you as board members count on having a common vision?
No,
You have variances of visions.
we do.
You have certain ideals, but you have variances of visions.
Yep.
So what happens sometimes is we do the corralling. We say, all right, we bring them all in the corral here, and this is what it is. This is what we're to accomplish. How do you think that works? I mean, it's good to say what the values are. Maybe the district will have its own goals that may be separate from yours. But if we decide let's get everybody under this umbrella here, how do you do that? Do you do that effectively?
Probably
Not if everybody
No.
doesn't have some sort of buy-in or agreement.
Yeah. So getting to that buy-in, you may get to the buy-in on the big, large question or issue, but the techniques and the strategies for getting there are going to vary. But if you bring everybody under the corral and say, this is it, this is what we're going to do, no matter what your position is, board member or superintendent, what do you think happens?
Rebelling.
Are you happy? Is everybody happy? We're happy campers? I don't even think superintendent would be a happy camper, because you've got to bring in what you bring to the board by your personality, by your leadership style, by your techniques and things you want to get done before you can have any kind of rational basis for what you're really looking at as a board. Now, what if you do as a board, this is on page 3 here, what do you do as a board, kind of get together and say, these are the goals we want to really work on, but the dissent comes through the strategies to get there. What happens then? What's the give and take?
I think you have to compromise.
Okay, okay.
Number one.
Is that popular in this country right now?
No.
And it really isn't. In fact, you see it at the legislature. You see it in any governing body is now almost polarized because the whole country's polarized. So it does filter down. It may not filter down as much to a community like your community. It's pretty close-knit, I would think, but it filters down. So then you get into, how do we deal with dissent? What is dissent? Is dissent 5-0 vote being 4-1? What if the superintendent wants a 5-0 vote? I've heard superintendents say, I want a 5-0 vote on everything. Is that realistic?
No.
Would you even want that as a superintendent? But you don't want dissent that becomes into rogue territory. Now, what do we mean by rogue territory? What's a rogue elephant? Think about it. We've heard that all say. He's a rogue elephant or a bull in a china shop. Maybe that we all understand that. We don't, elephants aren't around here, but so think about it. what is the nature of dissent? Is dissent, I don't like this strategy and I've got a better one, but say we all kind of agree on this one, I think I'll agree too. Is that the way it should be? Or can you even get to that point?
I've learned since I've been on the board that I voice my opinion, and if it isn't taken as the way I think it
Right.
should be, then I have to move on. All I can do is voice my opinion, and whatever the majority of the group says is the way we go.
What other members think? What do you feel really passionate about an issue? And it's something you really feel passionate about internally. It's not so much what voters have told you, but you really don't think this program is a very good program. You think this needs to be changed. You don't like the strategy you're being given. But the board's moving toward that strategy. You're going to be maybe 4-1 or 3-2. And so how do the two, do they have any particular role legally to go along with the board? Nope. What if it's discussed in executive session? Still doesn't make it. But how do you move to be an effective member of the board on the dissenting side of a question and yet be a member of the board that's in a productive role? Do you sort of...
You know, what, of course, I'm about 3 months, but, you know, something I look back in the last 9-10 months, over the last many years, several years, you know, there's times I look back and I think there should have been discussions, meaning we're, you know, trying to get a better vision of the whole concept, you know, of issues. I didn't think that could have been very helpful if we'd had more discussions, or maybe
Hammer it out.
tabled it at a meeting and bring it up, you know, or the next meeting. That's if I'm making sense.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I think table discussions, seeing the better vision of everybody, and instead of just my own.
So in other words, there would be a format through communications where everyone would be their part of the way to solve a problem, or the strategies to solve it would be vocalized. And then at some point, you know you have to make a decision, but everybody's thrown their thinking into the hat here. Is that basically?
Better vision of the why they feel the way they do.
So if you end up on the dissenting, if you end up in the minority in that way, you at least feel like you've had an input, and you then are probably, I don't know that I think rogue members will always be here. I know the State Department tries to deal with rogue members. You could deal with rogue members since Adam and Eve. I mean, you cannot really deal with people who are rogue members. You spend so much energy and time trying to deal with that. When you really could turn it into more positive, what is your thinking and how can you contribute to the bigger question? And then you've given that individual an opportunity. And if they don't really take that opportunity, how much time and energy and effort as a board do you want to spend on that? Because you can predict rogue members. I mean, I can look at a school board now and probably figure out, I don't think they're necessarily rogue members, but whenever it becomes predictable as 4-1 or 3-2, what does the public think? What's the public think about that? Is it positive?
No.
Could be.
I mean, I'm not.
Could be.
I think if I think you can avoid that rogue tag, you know, on somebody if they are if they try to communicate
Yeah.
their point, their side, for a couple reasons. One, I think you're kind of compelled to, because you're taking that stance, you know, on you know, lots of times pretty tough issues.
Yeah.
Number two, there's so many times we have things that come up that we have to vote on annually, or maybe every 3 years or 4 years or whatever.
Right.
And I think if you take you know, a strong stance, but you can kind of educate everybody on why you're taking that stance. You know, when that comes back around again, and maybe you're right, you know, maybe it comes back around and you're like, well, Dave was right. That was garbage. And we probably, you know, let's revisit that. And you remember those conversations. You remember his, you know, his sentiments why he voted that way. And I think that softens that a little bit to be able to come back, you know what I mean? And kind of come to the middle on it. And I just think, you know, sometimes you owe it to the public to say, this is why I'm doing it. I mean, you're not, you know, you're not required to, of course, but I think that's part of being, and that kind of takes that rogue stigma away. You know what I mean? If you just sit back and just vote, no explanation, no, you know, absolutely, you're going to be the rogue, rogue member.
Maybe rogue members undermine the majority decision because their passion for how they voted. How does that put the other members of the board? The board is a corporate body. What if you go out in the community and say, I'm not going to accept that, this is what I believe, and actually you're saying, I'm very honest, I'm true to myself, I don't believe this, and I'm not going to accept it, and I think it's wrong, and then 3 other people, or 2 other people, or 4, you know, it's the majority have voted for it. What do you do to the board's image then? Or do you do, I mean, is it positive or negative, depending on the issue? Think about it.
Up to individuals.
Up to the individual member.
I mean, it could make it, you know, I can remember my first time, Mr. Bowman tell me that you'll win some and you'll lose some. And you take the lose with the win. And again, and that win is very little, because if you have administration, central office doing their job, they do a great job. We've had some great superintendents and working with their staff and bringing back issues. So I think, you know, I'm not going to go out here and blast people reputation-wise. They can attack me all they want. We don't have to tell our reasonings. After our discussions as a board, again, as Scott was saying, it gives you a better vision. And if you still don't like that, then it's the way it is. You know, we go with it. And I myself was not going to go out here and bust people's reputation, and I'm just not going to do that.
So maybe we've talked about communicating your thoughts and then trying to make a safe environment for that, you know, safe to discuss how you feel about issues and strategies. Then after that, if you take a vote, then I guess the norm of this board or the practice or policy would be that if you disagree with that, you don't try to undermine it. You don't even have to comment on it, but you don't try to undermine it to the degree that you try to make the other members of the board put in an awkward position. Would that be that's just a standard. Would that be a standard? I mean, in any board you serve on, you're going to run in, it could be a church board, it could be a chess club, it could be anything. You're going to run into that sort of thing. So it's really setting a protocol that we are people enough to come to the board, have a conversation, make a decision, and then once we've made that decision, we honor that decision, not disparaging the decision, but then sometime in the future, we may be right, and people who might have been on the majority, as you said, may then, they'll need to be, you know, you'll bring everyone along to your side eventually. But it's really not, what I'm trying to get across here is, there are board members who actually make a career out of this, okay? I mean, if you look at the whole state, there are board members who make a career out of, well, I was not on the right side, and I'm going to go out in the community and say this and that. They really draw a lot of attention to themselves. They, you know, there's always within a community a group of people called againers who are against anything, especially polarized times. Well, these people really, they attract these people because people will say, hey, they all voted for that and I didn't, and here's my reason. And it comes like a virtue thing. You know, they're all wrong, I'm not. I really supported you as a community. So getting to a point where you can have an honest and faithful discussion of issues, and that be the balance of the way you do things, will then allow for the board to make very strong decisions, even though the strategies may not be approved by the majority, by the minority. There may be not full votes on that as far as a 5-0 vote or something, but there's a common understanding. We came together, and this is the position we've taken, and we're going to stick with that position. And then the member who maybe didn't agree with that strategy or whatever, that at least they have the knowledge they were listened to, given full, airing of their ideas on that, but yet they're not going to try to erode what the board does. Does that seem like a strategy you all would like to work with? Now, how difficult is that when push comes to shove?
Very.
It can be very difficult because some issues are issues that you, as a member, bringing your values, we talked about decisions are based on beliefs and values. Sometimes what if they run counter to your own beliefs? That's a hard pill to swallow sometimes, but it's probably better in the end. So maybe that's one of the things that boards need to, I'm trying to say, maybe that's one of the things that you really want to think about as a board, coming together in July or whenever, and saying these are things, and letting every member discuss the ideas that are important to them, what they feel like should be accomplished as goals for the system, then getting into the strategies they may have, bringing that up, and then have a good communications base so then you can work through those strategies. Maybe that's part of your procedural things you might be thinking about here. And then, now, sometimes we have to move to, this is on the page as well, the getting comfortable working with each other, okay? Now, what are some things that may interfere with getting comfortable? This is on page 3 at the bottom here. What about getting comfortable with working with each other? Should it be so you can predict how somebody's, you can actually probably do this. You can predict how they're going to feel about this, and it's your role to convert them to another opinion? Or how do you get to a comfort zone? What if somebody is as a member of the board, is very strongly opinionated and intense about something that other people on the board aren't as intense about? Are you going to, well, we've given everybody an opportunity to say what their priorities are, and we've been given communications, but should it be your role to really say, well, that's just a little bit farther than we are on this issue? How do you do that? Or do you do that? You have the safety net here that we talked about a moment ago, that you could at least express your ideas on something, and as a result of that, we expect you to police yourself rather than we policing you. How do you think about that? Is it my job as a board member to police my member to the left or the right? But is it my job as a board member to understand the corporate way we want to do things, and maybe I'm intense about it, and maybe I'm intense more so than the other members are about this very issue, but we've decided on the strategies is not as intense as I think we should have it, but I'm going to abide by that. Would that be a better way of looking at it?
I think if someone really believes something intensely and they're willing to give you the reasoning behind that, it would be a reason to listen to what they have to say. Believing something intensely and not vocalizing your reason is a little harder to, go with. But if you believe something and you have a reason intensely to believe that, then I think that it would behoove all of us to at least listen to the reason why they feel so intensely about something.
Okay. Does the board create a culture where everyone can vocalize, as you said, the reasons why they may be intensely supporting an issue or not supporting an issue?
That's a big, everybody has to be comfortable
That's the comfort.
expressing themselves.
Yeah.
And,
Well, and feel safe about voicing their opinions.
Right. So internally, getting to how a board operates, internally, if you're going to function, then you have the communications, the ideas, the strategies and everything. But it's really being able for that individual who may be a little bit more intense on an issue than other members are to be able to feel safe, or what, we don't want to word, in other words, to be welcome to say those things and know that they've been landed with all the members of the board, and know that the board members may land someplace else, but at least they've had their say, and at least they've articulated what they believe and how they believe about an issue. You think, you think that's something the board should always work toward? What would be some hindrances to that? What if two people have equally strong opinions and maybe verging on three? And what happens to the other two? Hey, we got two people that are hardcore about this, and maybe a third that's going to kind of lean that way. And we got two. What happens to those two? Are they just marginalized, or we're talking real world now?
You have to go back to those values that you set.
Yes.
At the beginning.
Go back to those values and try to bring everyone along, knowing that you won't bring everyone along, and knowing that in the end they may be right in another season of time that you'll be put in. But try to make a procedures and protocols where there is respect for each member and what they believe, as long as they're willing to vocalize it and not internalize it and just simply say, this is what I believe, but you really don't know what they believe. So that's the key, I think, here. Being able to have an environment where you can vocalize what you think, even though it may be in the minority. You may be 1 out of 5, but at least you've been able to say, I strongly believe that we should do this because when I was a kid, I went to school and this happened, or something like that. So you brought your history there, you brought your interior thoughts there, you've had a safe environment to say, to at least bring those to the attention of the people on the board, the other members of the board, and then after that, you at least have set up an environment on the board where everyone can bring their issues to the table and their ways of supporting those. I think, that is a long-winded way of saying it, but sometimes board fractures do not happen because of issues or personalities. They happen because of communications and not having a safe area to communicate and not really feeling like there is one as a member. And that can extend to more members, and it can extend on issues to members. So bringing that and developing that comfort zone. Now, comfort zones are give and take. That's what we started out with, for give and take. We don't want rogue members, and we don't want people that disrupt meetings, and we don't want people to bring in to disrupt meetings. We're a board, and those are people. We're a board, and we're going to work on a common goal or common agenda. And as a result of that, there's a little bit of give and take. So how do you, now that's easy said. I just said, how do you put that into practice? Who polices that? Or does anybody?
Well,
What?
public can through vote. I mean,
They can through a vote, and they do often through votes. That's correct. Is there any?
that's the only concrete, way to.
Yeah, that's ground zero concrete.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. But what if you're a member of the board and you don't feel like, well, use the word feel, you don't feel like, hey, I never get my points across, or I'm not listened to. What do you do then, as the other members of the board? Do they need to vocalize that to you in some way? Does a member who doesn't maybe feel like their points are being taken into consideration have the right or to say, I don't think you're all listening to me?
I would suggest, I would suggest going and coming and visiting the superintendent. I just think it's very important when you come to a conclusion. If there's you have that vision of your point is good, and you're not allocating and listening. I truly think, for me, I always went to the superintendent.
Okay, and you would go to the superintendent because they're the chief executive officer or not a member?
Yeah, because,
Okay.
so, it's, just to give them ideas how I would feel, for what reason differently than theirs. Yeah. I think Mr. Hiley, he's now the superintendent, and I've had my talk multiple times, setting down discussions during the COVID and times and other issues.
I think part of that being comfortable with you having your own say and letting other board members know what your feelings are. I think the other part of that safe side is that once you've said that, having another board member react to what you've said in a respectful way, but maybe a way to kind of probe those ideas some,
Yeah.
that brings out some more discussion amongst the whole board, because, you know, I think the more interaction you can have to really expand on your feelings on a point, but also respond to questions about your point, because there may be a question that makes you go back and question what you're thinking. I mean, I
Yeah.
think we have to really look at inside, but also listen to what other people's priorities are or reasons are.
Right.
To give
Going back
those good weight.
Table discussions is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And really, there are a lot of things about that. One thing is that you really would have to do this, and open meetings laws are fine, streaming and all that's fine. Florida has probably the strictest open meeting laws in the nation, and open meetings laws, which we have to follow and abide by, do they really constrain just having conversations?
Some.
Can you just call up a member of the board and talk about something? What did Mr. Boothby tell you? You can.
I mean, yeah,
You can, but you can't take it too far, and you can't take emails too far and things like that. So you've got to find a comfort within the meeting framework that you meet under, whether it's a special meeting, work session, whatever we call it, or a regular meeting, to be able to articulate your opinions. Because you can't do that by talking to members who talk to another member, all that sort of thing. So it's kind of, you're put in a little box here, but it's not a box you can't work around. In fact, it's a box you can use to your advantage, because if you come to a meeting and you're going to do something on an issue that is a public issue, and then people express their opinions, what they think about it, it's all out to the people in the audience, people streaming and things like that, then you get a feel for the board's thinking and you can capitalize on that. Because that's really about the only way you can do that. Now, as to whether there are other, I think a lot of this is finding a way to communicate hard things is really the issue with most boards. It always goes to that, because there will be issues that are very, very difficult that come before the board. And so as a result of that, creating an environment as a protocol for the board where everybody feels safe in saying what they think and they have the courage to say it helps move you into, like we're talking about, comfort zones out. You move into a way, we may not agree on this, and we may not agree on the strategies, but we've communicated about it, people know our opinions about it, and this is where we're going to do on this hard issue. We're going to make this decision. And that really what it amounts to, being able to do that and say that. And not really glide around issues, not really glide around and use other issues to get to that issue, but to get to the issues you need as a board. And they are going to be difficult sometimes. They're going to affect the whole district in different ways. Getting to that, that's a hard construct to think about, but it can be done. Working so there's a balance, understanding of how you're going to operate as a board and make that as part of your procedures and protocol before you ever get to voting. I think that's really the key here. So now we've discussed those points. Now let's go to this first page that we set out yesterday. Now, this is the one that says, be prepared to discuss the following. Now this is where we come into a discussion. Based on your role as County Board of Education member, list some specific traits or qualities that exemplify an executive.
Where is that?
effective-
I'm sorry, I'm
It's on
lost.
this one. The one I sent you last night.
Oh,
Do you have that?
it's in the,
Okay, yeah. Let's go.
and I did answer,
Yeah, let's really talk about these. Now, these are where you really get to say your.
yeah, I have
Yeah.
some notes.
What we're really saying is, if it were up to you as an individual member, how would you describe an effective board of education, a corporate body? What are some things that you would say that show that you're an effective corporate body as a board?
Transparency, trust, cooperation.
Okay, transparency. Now, transparency would mean that whatever you're doing, we talked about some framework for that a moment ago. The clear communications, the ideas that you have the respect for your position, things of that. Then transparency and then
Trust
trust. We're going to get at that in a moment. And then accountability, is that right?
and
Okay.
cooperation.
Now, and cooperation. So then, if we use this as an effective board, the board as a corporate body is transparent in what it's going to be doing to the degree you can. We have executive sessions, so we're not getting into mechanics of details. You're transparent. This is where you're headed. This is what you've told the public. People are aware, and then you're going to build trust to be able to get to that. Now, when we say trust here, do we need that the public can trust you as a board to do what you're saying you're going to do and decide? Or do we mean trust as I can trust the other members to help us get there? What's trust?
Second one.
Second one. Now, when we get into that, that's an intra-board thing. So that gets back to all the stuff we talked about a moment ago. So do you come together and say, well, we're going to build trust, or does it evolve over time? What goes in? Like, that's a really important question. I hear this all the time. We've got to trust the members. We've got to trust superintendent. What's that really mean?
It's gotta evolve over time.
It
Right.
does
Even
evolve.
if
You
can
cannot,
say it if you
you
want.
can, yeah, you cannot say, all right, we're gonna trust everyone, okay? Because you haven't developed.
You gotta build it.
Yes, you've gotta build credibility, and you've got to build the ability to be able to know what the trust means. If the trust means tit for tat or transitional dealings or what, or does it really mean that we will trust you to bring your opinion to us, and we will trust your thinking and why you've thought that? Or does it mean anything beyond that? Are you bound by something you say? What if you're wrong later?
You should be able to admit it and say, hey, I made a mistake.
Okay.
And I
In
wanna
other
fix
words,
it."
now we get back into that environment that you could say, hey, look, on that issue, I really made a mistake. Or what if you say the board made a mistake?
I think we have to be as a group to admit that.
You have to be in a group to admit that. But what if you see something you've done and you're going down the road in about 6 months and it's not working? It's a big hype thing, and who owns the transparency for that?
I think we do.
You do. You own the transparency for all the fiscal things,
Right.
all the academic things. You own the transparency.
And sometimes, you're making decisions based on the best knowledge and information that you have. Sometimes, whether it's 3 months, 6 months, you have additional information or
Yeah.
something else. So sometimes those are reasons gives you some reasons to maneuver that something you didn't know at the time.
And that does come into play, because that's why some people want to go in executive session and discuss something. They really put the superintendent in a spot, because he or she, they may know more about that issue than they can even legally bring to you at that particular point. But you're trying to get them in to discuss what you've heard from the community. Does that ever happen?
Continually.
All the time.
It does happen. So getting to that point there that you're talking about, getting to that point that sometimes later, then you may be hyped and strong as a board on something, but then you may have to tell the public, well, based on the information, I don't know how you would say that, but based on the information we had at the time, we thought this was the right decision. How do you think that flies with the administration that recommended it? Should that be a concern?
Yes.
Yeah. Why? Why should it be a concern? You're the board, they're the administration, they recommended it. Who owns it? Who voted on it?
We do.
You did. So you actually own it. But if you own it, and it happened on that issue, can you be sure it doesn't happen on another issue? What would you do to be sure? Get more information,
Yes.
ask more questions, see more alternatives.
These as a group,
As a group, I'm talking as a group.
as a group.
We're not freelancers. We
One or
don't
two
freelance.
or
Yeah.
messages or phone calls, as a group.
As a group.
I think a lot of times you can't do this with everything, but some things, maybe most things, I don't know. You just need to slow down. you know.
Oh, deliberative.
And I don't mean like just table it. I mean, maybe set expectations for how soon you want to solve this or how soon you can solve it, you know. I mean, you can't wait forever on everything, but you know, if you know you have partial or limited information and you got time to find more, then, you know, why hurry, you know? And because you might delay something for 6 months or a year, but if you make a terrible decision, you can ruin something for 5 or 10 years, you know? So I think sometimes you just need to, and I think a lot of boards do that and they don't mean to. I think they just, everything's flowing so nicely and you're just like, yeah, this sounds good. Everybody, you can just see it in everybody's faces. Everybody's in agreement. Let's just roll with this baby and go. And then, you know, sometimes 6 months later, like, ugh. I'm not saying that happens to us. I'm just saying, like,
No, you're right.
you know, that I know that happens, you know.
I would think the public would be happy to hear that we feel that we may have made a misjudgment and now are correcting what we did in the past. I mean, to me, you're at least willing to admit you've made a mistake and that there are reasons why now we aren't sure we made the correct decision there.
Given all the information we had at the time.
Exactly.
So it evolves is what.
Yes.
Now, so you had trust, transparency, trust, and cooperation. Anyone else have similar thoughts?
I could throw one thing in
Yes,
this
sir.
discussion. I think this is where, you know, the collaboration and cooperation between the superintendent and board becomes really important. Because many of the decisions you make, you know, don't have to be split-second decisions. So you have to get into a kind of a groove with your superintendent about, okay, how far in advance do we want to start getting information on a certain item?
Right.
Now, that's a very good
If
point.
he knows something's coming up that you're gonna have to deal with in 6 months, then 2 or 3 or 4 months in advance, he starts prepping you with information as
Right,
they become available. So that's
Yeah.
a give and take there, so that, you know, there's some things that flare up that you've gotta, you know. it's a
Yeah, and that's
crisis,
what
you
what
gotta
I
take
was
care of it.
hitting on. I mean, we would have to lean on him really, really hard to say, you know, is this something we can?
But he can help you map out those
Exactly.
long-range things
Right.
Yep.
and give you enough pipeline of information. And, you know, and then when you're getting information, if it sparks more questions or you think you need more information,
Yeah.
that's where you need to communicate that and expect that to, you know, that pipeline to open up more if you need more information.
100%.
And probably that does happen with the way the calendars are for personnel decisions and things like that. You probably do have enough time to get some deliberative information. Sometimes the things are emergencies, but I would think it's usually trying to work on a deliberative way. And so you would get information at various touch points, and then you could make a decision informed as you have. All right, now you talked about cooperation. Now, you talked about transparency, trust, and cooperation. What does cooperation mean? Does it mean the things we're saying, or does it mean, give me your ideas about what you?
Just as a whole, as a board, when we're talking, to cooperate with each other, to
Okay.
listen to each other,
Mhm.
to give and take.
Give and take, which we started out with. You know, we have to there has to be a give and a take,
Yeah.
and an environment for that information. So checking up on cooperation really means we look at things as 5 individuals, then we look at things as a board, and we then. Is that kind of what you're saying? We cooperate. We actually help each other understand the issue.
Yeah.
Maybe another way to say that. Anything else on the first question? We had the trust, transparency, trust, and cooperation. How that's an effective board. What's another thing of way an effective board operates?
My first one was ability to communicate and listen, but we've done that. We've talked about that a good bit.
Okay.
And a caring concern for our staff and students,
Okay.
fairness and even-handedness.
So you're talking about process things.
Yeah.
You got process things.
And ability to admit mistakes, be accountable, and apologize.
Okay. All right. We've covered a lot of those, but
We have.
yeah, and that's good because we're getting, and the part about supporting staff and students, that is a very important consideration because sometimes the board may not be seen as a body who can do that. And you know what I mean by that? It looks like everything's administrative, but you can also do that as well. So I think reaching out and touching that way is important. Any other ideas on an effective board? We're trying to figure out what's an effective board. We've already kind of talked about some things. You don't have to all agree. You do have to have kind of a mission. You're going to get information at intervals. You're going to make good decisions. You're going to be deliberative. What else makes for an effective board?
I think you have to have some level of efficiency.
Okay.
You know,
Okay.
just going back to the timeline stuff, you know, with information and back, I mean, you know, again, you know, we're going to lean on our superintendent to, you know, kind of frame this and
Right.
say, hey, look, we got about 6 months. We've got to
Yeah.
get this done. You know, there's, you know, there's always an efficient time frame to get things done in. Whether you make it a little bit shorter or you make it a little bit longer.
Okay. What about meetings efficiency?
Yeah.
Meetings. That's how you're known as a board. I mean, if you look at the Kanawha County Board 40 years ago, they were the joke of that was when their meetings were all, and legislators came to town and listened. Formed opinions about school boards based on that. So your meetings really are the way you communicate internally as a board and then governance-wise. So are your meetings, do you feel like your meetings are effective? Do they bring people in? Do they, are they run well? Are they where members can speak and say what they want? Is deliberation? So think about that. Is that part of that cooperation? Does that come across in meetings? If you're
Should.
cooperating? Should.
I think all those things overlap a little bit.
Yeah, all those things tie together. And the only way most people see you, including people probably in Mongolia right now if they're listening, would be how you function as a board in a meeting. That's where the values are, that's where the judgments are made in many ways. In other words, if the meeting is contentious, then what do you think the public thinks? Is it warranted to be contentious? Or if the meeting is just simply placid and nothing happens, what do you think people think? Do you attract people if everything is just, you know, routine and rote?
I think that's probably one of the things that we probably need to work on the most. You know, you've got to have, and quite frankly, it all goes back to communication.
Yeah.
And I think that is one way, you know, when we had the special circumstance review, I think the thing about us going into executive session too much, you know, that's why. I think all of us use that as a tool of communication rather than our meetings as a tool of communication. Yeah. And so we need to be able to figure out how we do it the right way.
Right. Well, we need to end a little bit early so you can get ready for your meeting. Now, if you go to page 2 of this document, there is thinking about what's called escalating expectations and heightening accountability. That means longitudinally, the longer you work with your superintendent or CEO in a relationship, there is going to be more of that. The expectations rise and the accountability levels rise as well because you're functioning as a team. We got you through the norming, forming, whatever that is, now you're performing. You're performing as a group. And as you perform as a group, you're informed by your superintendent, who is your CEO, and they then are going to be, more is going to be expected of them, more is going to be expected high level of you, and then there's heightened expectations of accountability. But that's where trust comes in. You do not declare we have trust. It has to develop. And if everybody works together, and you use the term that really fits in here, cooperation. If you're working on a cooperative framework, then there are going to be glitches, there are going to be mistakes, there are going to be errors, there are going to be perceived errors, there are going to be perceived this and that, but you're really working for the long run. the longitudinal run, down the road, the vision. So the vision informs where you want to go as a board. You got your protocol and all this, and then you're going to be working to develop a relationship that develops over time with the superintendent so that trust emerges but is not imposed. You cannot impose trust. So that's kind of what we're trying to get at here. This takes a look at the longitudinal view. And now Mr. Kelly and I disagree with it. I hate this stay in your lane thing because it's not really collegial. This is a collegial environment. You're really working toward goals that you both play off each other. In other words, you both add to the discussion and how you get things done. And sometimes the superintendent might say, you as a board, I think you need to do this. Or sometimes you as a superintendent or as a board may say, superintendent, I think before we get into this, you may need to do this. Now, is that staying in your lane or is that looking longitudinally? Now, if it's telling the superintendent what to do, it's a different matter. But if you really get into the thinking about this, you're looking at a human resources enterprise that you govern, and actually you govern, and you're responsible for. So maybe part of that is trying to not so much stay in your lane as, and it's really staying in. You are staying in your role, I think, if you have the ability to communicate to the superintendent. I think before we do this, you might want to think about that. Is that staying in your lane? In a strict sense, it might not be, because the superintendent would be giving you information if you really follow that all the way through. Now, I'm on a little precipice here, probably. But you really need to think about that, because I think you need to work out a relationship and let it develop over time where there's an honesty that is the trust and the cooperation. That honesty is, Mr. Superintendent, I know you think this, but maybe you ought to think about this. And maybe you can say that as a board corporately or individually. And then the superintendent might say, as a board, I think this would be a terrible decision if you made it. Does that work that way?
Absolutely.
It does. And it's not worried about staying in your lane. It's worrying about really going down the highway so you move the system forward. So that's how I look at it. Now, again, staying in your lane is not a bad, we don't want to drive home. So thank you for your time. Now, before we go, just go around the room. You really had your training on open meetings. I forget what I said about open meetings, except follow the law on that, and you'll be fine. But let's go around the room and anybody who has like one statement or whatever, including Superintendent Mr. Hess, and see what you all think.
About this session or any?
This or anything on your mind, actually.
One of the things I would just say is, the way I always viewed it is that my job as the superintendent, one of the jobs, is I tried to do what I could to keep the board as organized so they can be as effective as possible. That's always the goal of the superintendent, is try to make sure, because your successes, whether you like it or not, are tied together. The more successful the superintendent can help the board be, and vice versa, that only benefits the system in the long run. If you look at a lot of studies, long-seated boards and long-seated superintendents, if they've got their act together, that's when the system really begins to make great gains, academically and in very many ways. So, you're kind of hand to hand there to make it work. So it's got to be kind of a relationship, a marriage, so that we're just all pulling in the same direction. So if there's things that you need from the superintendent in terms of information, things like that, you need to communicate that, which will make it more effective for you. That if he needs, suggestions, or not suggestions, if he needs input from you, that's really important to keep those communications open, because one of the things is nobody likes to walk into a meeting and have surprises. We like to, if you know something's on the horizon that's going to be a bump, let him know. If he knows something's coming up, it means that's a two-way street. So it goes back to that communication, but realizing that for the good of the system, each entity wants the other working at peak efficiency. Because ultimately, the more you get that accomplished, then the more success your students and your employees are going to have. And that's what we're all about.
Karina, have any comments?
No, thank you. I'll have to, I think that, I think that working efficiently as a board is what we need to, communication is a huge part of what we need to work on, and that should be a huge thing that all of us look at.
Well, rather than be the professor that calls everybody out, does anyone else have any comments? That happened to me in college. On call.
Thanks.
Journalism professor.
Yeah, Byers is up there in
On
the
call.
top too.
And then you were a call on the spot, and you were always wrong, no matter what you said.
Yeah, it didn't matter.
This guy, you were always wrong with his name. Anyway, but, Mr. Hiley?
I think, the point that resonated to me the most tonight was just mapping out those long-term things for members and making sure that they understand those things. I think a lot of times, we get caught up in the day-to-day. We need to really look beyond the day-to-day and make sure we're ready for what's coming.
And you have a good system, you have resources, good academic achievement. You got a lot of things that other systems do not have going for them, so capitalize on that through the cooperation and things we said. So you now have a few moments to prepare for your meeting, and I do thank you for the opportunity